Mercedes and Red Bull are now being investigated, after using a completely legal system that gave them up to 1/10, even 2/10, right where qualifying laps are decided. That's the difference between pole position and losing control of the entire race. And no one stopped it. For 3 races, it worked perfectly. No penalties, no warnings, nothing. Until the FIA looked closer and realized this wasn't just clever engineering. It was something much bigger. Because this trick didn't just make them faster. It made them unpredictable. And in Formula 1, unpredictability at high speed is a problem. Now the FIA is digging deeper. Analyzing telemetry. Reviewing software behavior. Questioning intent. And suddenly, this isn't just about performance anymore. It's about whether a legal advantage crossed a line it was never supposed to reach. Because once you understand what they were really doing, you realize this could change everything about how the season is decided. Because what the FIA is doing now goes far beyond banning a trick. They're not just asking what happened. They're asking how it happened, and more importantly, how many times. And that changes the situation completely. Because when an investigation starts in Formula 1, it doesn't stop at one race. It goes backwards. Lap by lap. Session by session. Race by race. And suddenly, every qualifying result becomes a question. Every pole position re-examined. Every tiny margin reconsidered. Because if this system was used consistently, then those gains weren't accidental. They were planned, repeated, optimized. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because now, it's not just about a clever interpretation of the rules. It's about whether that interpretation created an unfair advantage over time. Now here's where the real pressure begins. Because telemetry doesn't lie. Every input is recorded. Every system response is logged. Every micro decision stored in the data. And if the FIA sees a pattern, perfect timing, identical execution, lap after lap, then it becomes very difficult to argue that it was natural. And once intent enters the conversation, the consequences change completely. Because Formula 1 allows innovation. It rewards creativity. But it draws a hard line when safety systems are involved. And that's exactly where this case sits. Right on that line. Or maybe, just over it. And this is why Mercedes and Red Bull are now in a position they didn't expect. Because a system that was once invisible is now the most visible thing on the car. Every move they make will be watched. Every lap, questioned. Every gain, analyzed. And that creates something teams hate more than anything. Uncertainty. Because now, they don't know how far the investigation will go. Will it stop at monitoring? Will it lead to penalties? Will it reopen past results? No one knows. And in Formula 1, that kind of unknown is dangerous. But here's where it gets even more intense. Because while some teams are under pressure, others are watching very closely, waiting. Because if anything comes out of this investigation, if any results are affected, if any penalties are applied, the entire championship could shift overnight. Positions, points, momentum, all of it could change. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because this is no longer just a technical story. It's a competitive one, a political one, a strategic one. And at the center of it is a single question the FIA is trying to answer. Not just what the system did, but why it was used in the first place. And once that answer is clear, everything else follows. And this is where the investigation becomes something much bigger than anyone expected. Because once the FIA starts digging into intent, they don't just look at what the system did. They start looking at the philosophy behind it. Why was it created? How it was developed? Who approved it? And suddenly, this is no longer just engineering. It becomes accountability. Because in Formula 1, nothing like this happens by accident. This isn't a driver pressing the wrong button. This isn't a random system glitch. This is design. Planned, tested, simulated, refined over multiple sessions. And if that's the case, then the FIA isn't just looking at a moment. They're looking at a process. A chain of decisions that led to this exact outcome. And that's where things get even more serious. Because now, responsibility enters the picture. Engineers, strategists, software developers, team leadership, everyone involved in that chain becomes part of the story. And the deeper the FIA goes, the more questions appear, not fewer. Because if one team found this, could others have known? Could customer teams have had access? Could this have spread without anyone realizing? And that opens a completely new angle. Because this might not be isolated. It might be systemic. And if that's true, then the impact is far bigger than just Mercedes and Red Bull. It affects the entire grid. But here's the detail that makes this even more intense. The FIA doesn't need public evidence. They don't need speculation. They have the data. Complete, precise, undeniable. Every lap, every command, every millisecond. And that means one thing. The answer already exists. It's just a matter of when and how they reveal it. And that's what every team is waiting for right now. Because until that moment comes, everything feels unstable. Results feel temporary. Performance feels questionable. And trust starts to fade. Because if a legal system can be pushed this far, what else is being pushed right now? What else is sitting inside the regulations, waiting to be discovered? And this is the uncomfortable reality of Formula One. It's not just about speed. It's about interpretation, precision, and finding the exact point where the rules can be stretched without breaking. But this time, that point might have been crossed. And if the FIA decides it was, then the consequences won't just affect one race. They could redefine the entire season. Because once an investigation reaches this level, there's only one thing left to determine. Not whether it happened, but how far it went, and who was really behind it. And this is the moment where everything reaches its breaking point. Because once the FIA has all the data, all the telemetry, all the patterns, there are only two possible outcomes. Either this was a clever interpretation, pushed to the absolute limit of legality, or it was something more. Something that went just far enough to cross a line nobody saw at first. And that decision changes everything. Because if the FIA concludes this stayed within the rules, then Mercedes and Red Bull walk away with something incredibly valuable. Proof. Proof that they were operating at a level others simply didn't reach. That they saw something hidden and executed it perfectly. And in Formula One, that kind of advantage is respected, even feared. But if the FIA decides otherwise, if they believe intent turned into exploitation, then the consequences won't be quiet. They won't be subtle. They will be immediate and very public. Because now, we're not talking about removing a trick. We're talking about rewriting results, re-evaluating performances, possibly even altering the early championship standings. And that's where the real tension is. Because right now, nobody knows which direction this will go. Not the teams, not the drivers, not even the fans. But everyone understands one thing. The decision is coming. And when it does, it won't just explain what happened. It will define what is allowed moving forward. Because this case sets a precedent. A line in the sand. How far can a team go when a rule leaves room for interpretation? How much freedom exists before safety overrides everything? And that answer will shape not just the season, but every innovation that comes after. Because from this point on, every engineer in the paddock is watching. Every team is learning. Every idea is being filtered through one simple question. Is it legal? Or is it just not caught yet? And that changes the mentality of the entire sport. Because when teams stop trusting the limits, they start testing them, pushing further, taking bigger risks, until something forces them to stop. And this might be that moment. The one that resets the balance. The one that reminds everyone, there is always a boundary, even if you can't see it at first. So when the FIA finally delivers its conclusion, it won't just close this chapter. It will answer the question that has been building from the very beginning. Not how the trick worked, not who used it best, but something much deeper. In a sport where every thousandth matters, where every advantage can decide a championship, how far is too far? And more importantly, who decided to find out? And this is where the story delivers its final twist. Because after all the analysis, all the tension, all the speculation, the truth was never as simple as cheating. And it was never as clean as innovation. It was something in between. Something far more dangerous. Because what Mercedes and Red Bull found wasn't a way to break the rules. It was a way to expose them. To reveal a weakness hidden inside the system itself. A gap that nobody at the FIA had fully considered. A moment where a safety mechanism could be turned into performance, without violating a single line of the regulations. And that's the real story. Not the trick, not the investigation, but the fact that this was possible in the first place. Because Formula One is built on precision, on control, on rules designed to eliminate unpredictability. And yet, this situation created exactly that. A scenario where two cars, on the same part of the track, could behave completely differently. One slowing down, the other still accelerating. And that difference, even if it lasts just seconds, is enough to change everything. Lap times, grid positions, race outcomes, even championships. So when the FIA stepped in, they weren't just stopping a trick. They were correcting a flaw in how the rules interacted with reality. And that's why the response was so precise. Not a ban. Not a rewrite. But monitoring. Control. Visibility. Because once something can be seen, it can be stopped. And once it can be stopped, it disappears. And that's exactly what happened. The advantage is gone. The system is neutralized. The grid is reset. But the impact remains. Because now every team knows something they didn't before. There are still gaps in the rules. Still opportunities. Still moments where interpretation becomes power. And that knowledge changes everything. Because from this point forward, every engineer is looking deeper. Every team is questioning more. Every system is being pushed closer to the edge, trying to find the next opportunity, the next hidden advantage, the next detail that nobody else sees. And that's the cycle of Formula One. Relentless, unforgiving, always evolving. But this time, there's a difference. Because now the FIA is watching more closely than ever. Not just the results, but the intent behind them. Not just what happens on track, but how it happens. And that creates a new reality, a new balance, where innovation still exists, but the margin for interpretation is smaller, sharper, more dangerous. So as the season moves forward, every lap carries more weight, every performance more scrutiny, every advantage more risk. And the real question is no longer about what happened. It's about what comes next. Because if this was possible, if something this effective could exist unnoticed, then one thing becomes clear. This won't be the last time. It never is. And somewhere, right now, there is already another idea, another interpretation, another detail waiting to be discovered, waiting to change everything all over again.